Welcome once again to In Focus and to Sid Caudle. And Sid, we're going to cover the world. We're going to dash around the world as we usually do. But we're going to start with what may appear to be an old story, but it keeps coming back. And I guess it will come back in the future. And that is the CME, the Church of England, being complicit, inverted commas, in the immigration saga. Their weakness and the weakness of allegedly judges has allowed the thing to swamp us. Now, Suella, of course, got into trouble saying that it was an invasion. Well, perhaps I'm going to get in trouble. I think it is. And you look back through history and saw the traditional invasion, whether it was from the North Sea or whatever, the numbers don't compare at all. This is truly an invasion. And with certain invaders, there is no intention at all of taking on the culture of our country, getting involved in our country, being assimilated and joining in. That's the big problem. It's nothing to do with black, white or brown. It's the cultural thing.
Yeah, well, as far as the Church of England are concerned, the problem basically is that they haven't grasped that although in Christianity, in Judeo-Christianity, I should say, because it's in the Ten Commandments, it says, "You shall not bear false witness." And Jesus said, "I am the truth." That is not the same in other religions, and especially Islam, where it's a good thing to lie to disbelievers to gain an advantage. So as far as Islam is concerned, as far as Muslim is concerned, if they say to the immigration people, "I've converted to Christianity, it's not safe to send me back to wherever they've come from," then they've done nothing wrong as far as their religion is concerned. In fact, quite the opposite. I mean, they've done something that's recommended as far as their religion is concerned. And an imam would say, "Oh, you've told them you converted to Christianity, have you? Well done. Yeah, good idea. As long as you make sure you still come to the to your Friday prayers, and make sure you still say your Muslim prayers. It doesn't matter what you say. You can say you've converted to Christianity. It's no problem." And I'll give you some tips if you like. Here's some tips on what the Bible says. So if they ask you this question, for instance, who are the 12 disciples? Well, here are the names. This will help you. And they've got a record of other questions that immigration are asking. And the imam will just help them along the way. Now, the Church of England have got no grasp of that, no grasp at all. That it's culturally accustomed for them to tell lies. So instead of actually questioning them and testing them, they just accept everything on face value. "Oh, you converted, fantastic. Yeah, well, come to church. Will you be free on Sunday?" And it's like, well, you only have to go to church once a week. You have to go to the mosque 5 times a day. So this religion is much easier. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'll come on Sunday. Yeah, no problem. But when can I be christened, or when can I be baptized, depending on what branch of Christianity it is? It's like the sooner that can be done, the better. I'm very keen to be baptized. And didn't it say in Acts that the Ethiopian eunuch, as soon as he was converted, was baptized? So they're probably told that. They're probably given that tip by the imam. Tell them you want to be done immediately.
Well, it beggars belief, doesn't it? Let's stick a bit with the Church of England, and let's stick a bit with contention, maybe, because maybe with what's happening, which we're going to mention shortly, in Scotland today, April Fool's Day, with their new gagging laws, let's call them. Let's go to the Church of England and say, we've got an unusual situation here, and I personally reject the idea of naivety. I don't think they are. I think the Church of England is full of extreme liberalism. They accept everything as long as it is not in the Bible. Now, as an example, let's mention the H word, the homosexual word. Now, we're a free country. If people want to be homosexuals, fine. Let's get on with it. But from the church's point of view, they're also saying the same thing, and indeed encouraging it. Now, throughout the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament, which is the handbook of the C of E, or should be, homosexuality is roundly condemned. Some people say it's a special sin. We won't go into that today. But it's condemned. And when you've got the guy who allegedly is a homosexual choosing who should be the bishop of the next region in England, then what do we expect? You've got the Marxist agenda, which is throughout our universities, in a good part of our judiciary, and in a major part of the Anglican Church. We're in a mess, Sid.
Well, yes, you see, and they've got no backbone. I mean, for instance, you go down Oxford Street, and there's a great big sign at the beginning of Oxford Street saying, welcome to Ramadan. And they've got great big pictures of crescent moons up. And this is on Easter Sunday. On Easter Sunday, you've got welcome to Ramadan. And then you've got Biden, who's announced that Easter Sunday is Transgender Awareness Day. And Biden thinks that's a wonderful idea. And not only Biden, you've got the Labour Party. Starmer just take it on board. Yep, today is Transgender Awareness Day, Easter Sunday. I mean, if that isn't satanic, what is? I mean, that shows that what they're doing is a direct challenge to Christianity. And the church, instead of having the backbone of saying, no, we're not having welcome to Ramadan on Oxford Street, that's completely unacceptable in a Christian country, we're not having it, we're not accepting it. You know, instead of having, there's no way this could be called Transgender Awareness Day. If you call this Transgender Awareness Day, then we're going to recommend all our people vote against the Labour Party. I mean, they're miles from taking that sort of position. That's the sort of position they ought to be taking. They ought to be taking a strong position and saying, we're standing for Christian values, we're Christian representatives. All this is completely unacceptable in a Christian country. That's what they should be saying, but they're not. Of course they're not. Because half of them are infiltrated anyway. They're infiltrated by Marxists. I mean, what you said about the person appointing bishops, I mean, what we do know is that he's in a same-sex relationship. So, you know, I mean, obviously we don't know what he does in his personal life, but if someone's in a same-sex relationship, you know that they're completely unsuitable to be appointing bishops. I mean, yet that's the person that Justin Welby has put in place to appoint bishops. I mean, it's a joke. It's frankly a joke. And I'm afraid it's not surprising that the Church of England is actually losing members hand over fist. It's losing income. I've been told its income's been reduced by a third, and people are walking away in large numbers from the Church of England. And of course, there are some very good charismatic Anglican churches, and there's a New Wine organisation that heads up a lot of these groups, and there's the Evangelical Alliance, which supports all the evangelical Anglican churches, and there are many of them, and they're mostly very big churches. So it's not universal in the Anglican Church, but the leadership of the Anglican Church is just terrible, terrible.
Well, the leadership is weak. The leadership of the United Kingdom is weak. It's allowed things to happen that are now biting back at it. You mentioned Biden there, and there's the famous rolling of the Easter eggs at the White House. And Biden even, as I understand it, banned any sign or any suggestion that this was in any nature a Christian festival. Now, before we blame Biden personally, we look at the man. Who's his advisors? Should we be blaming his advisors? Who's running the country? I mean, Obama is running it. Who knows?
Well, yes. I mean, you see, Biden says, I'm a Catholic. I'm a Catholic, but I'm banning all Christian symbols from the White House. I mean, what a joke. I mean, obviously, the man's just doing what he's told to do. And somebody must have said, we don't want Christian symbols, you know, so they put these massive Easter bunnies beside himself and his wife as they wave to people from the White House. And it's like as if somehow the Easter bunny is the symbol of Easter. I mean, quite honestly, Joe Biden has made it quite clear he does not want the votes of Christians. And I believe Keir Starmer is the same. I believe Keir Starmer, by supporting this Transgender Awareness Day on Easter Sunday, has made it very clear he does not want the votes of Christians. Now, if they don't want the votes of Christians, then Christians have got to take notice and say, Biden doesn't want our votes. And same with Starmer. They've got to take notice. Starmer doesn't want our vote. You know, he's actively working against us. So when it comes to the ballot box, hopefully Christians will en masse vote against these people, you know, and we hope that there will be free and fair elections and people will have their say.
Let's go to dear old Oz, shall we? And we'll change the subject completely in one sense. The New South Wales part of Australia has been very liberal for donkey's years, and they've been supporting a football team called the Flying Bats. Now, this team is a ladies' football team, and it raises a number of issues. Half the team, it turns out, are transgender. So you've got a 6'2", 90-kilo male playing against a 5'1" female, probably weighing in about 50-odd kilos. And over the years, this has been going on for 20 years, this football team has won every single match, practically. Last year, I believe they didn't lose one. But in their wokeness, they have broken limbs. Obviously, when you've got a 90-kilo man tackling a 58-kilo lady, something's got to give, and it does. And the FA, their FA, are encouraging this because it's diverse. Let's go a bit further, Sid. If we investigate the whole women's soccer movement, and some people would say it's even in the rugby movement, the BBC, for various reasons, are promoting this like mad. One reason, of course, is they can't get on to the main league male because it costs too much money. Allegedly, they'd sooner pay one individual a lot of money, Mr. Lineker, than try and get in and put some decent football matches on. But they're promoting matches, and it has been alleged that 50% of the women's team are made up of lesbian members. Now, they can be made up of what they like. Again, a free country. But is this a healthy state of the nation?
Well, no, it's not, and it's completely unfair, like you say, to the ladies, because some of them are very skilled and very good footballers, and and they should have an even playing field. But it does affect a lot of sports, and it's going to affect situations in the Olympics. But it's completely unfair. I mean, we've seen it in the past. If they have a male who claims to be a woman running against women who are birth women, then obviously they've got a massive advantage when it comes to sport. And I hope and believe that the Olympics will simply not allow it. If they do, then it'll be just a waste of time watching women's sport in the Olympics. I mean, because some of these women, bless their hearts, have worked like crazy, spent hours and hours, whatever it is, swimming, running, even weightlifting. They spent hours and hours practicing their sport. Rowing, I mean, women's rowing is very competitive, but you need strength. And obviously somebody's born a man has got a massive advantage in a rowing boat compared with somebody born a woman. And it's just completely unfair to the birth women that to have birth men competing against them. And it just makes a complete and utter nonsense of the whole of women's sport if they allow it. But women are fighting back. Sadly, from our perspective, it's being led by the feminist movement. But God bless them. I mean, it seems strange in some ways that feminists who themselves are quite anti-Christian are actually leading the fight back against the transgender movement. But that's the reality of it. And God bless the feminists for fighting back. But I mean, they're basically saying, you know, you're not a woman, you are a man, and you cannot pretend to be a woman. And, you know, let them fight back, let them win. And they are winning in some situations. There's some states in America that have banned any birth men from taking part in women's sports, and quite right. And it should spread completely around the world.
Right, Sid. Well, again, we're going to change subjects, absolutely. We're going to talk about the triple lock and the position of Gen Z, Generation Z. And we're going to think about the criticism that Gen Z have about the old people in the United Kingdom. They've got it easy. They've had a good time. We can't even buy our own houses. Well, they've got a good point there. But don't blame the grannies. Now, looking at this on a fiscal level, after the budget, it appears that the old age pensioner, horrible phrase, isn't it? Seniors, perhaps a little bit better, as they say in the States, is £20 a year better off because of triple lock. Everybody criticises this triple lock. Well, you know, there's views on either side of that one. But with the fiscal drag coming into it, literally dragging it down, the old age pensioner actually is only £20 a year better off. In one sense, until they pay their rates, until everybody pays their rates this next year, council tax, let's bring that phrase up to date, 5 to 7% increase on average. That is really going to set things back for everybody, except the middleies. Who are the middleies? Well, a family earning about 60 grand, because with the alleged help of family allowance, let's call it in old terms, and getting your kids into nursery and getting nearly £1,000 off because of national insurance, they're the winners in all this. Is this deliberate? Have the Tories deliberately done this, or is it a bit of naivety? Oh, golly gosh, that's what's happened.
Okay, well, there's a lot of questions raised there, but the first thing I'll say is that when the old age pension was first set up, the average life expectancy was roughly 68. So a man retiring at 65 will probably live for about 3 years. The situation now is the life expectancy is about 85. So we're talking about paying the pension for very much longer. And I believe that the right approach is to increase the retirement age. They're gradually increasing it to 70, and I believe that's the right approach, but maintain the pension for those that are older. And because people are living longer and able to work longer, that is the right approach. So I support that approach. Now, I just should explain to people what fiscal drag is, because most people probably don't understand that. So tax thresholds have been set at 12,500 now for about 4 years. And if the tax threshold is the amount of 0% tax you pay, so it's the amount of your income that's completely tax-free. Now, because it's only been the same for about 4 years, and during that time, we've had inflation of around 20%, that basically means that in real terms, if you take account for inflation, the 0% band should have increased by about 2,500. So it should now be about 15,000. Because that hasn't increased, that basically means that people that are earning small amounts of money, I mean, I say small amounts of money, but anything more than 12,500 in a year, are basically having to pay tax that they, in real terms, they shouldn't have been paying. So that's basically fiscal drag, because they don't actually, the government doesn't announce anything. They don't actually announce that we're reducing the tax thresholds. They just leave them the same and do nothing. But by the way, that does also apply to the top rate of tax. So the top level at which people are paying tax, which is about 53,000, that's also stayed the same and hasn't increased. So there are a lot more people that are paying 40% tax on some of their income, which in the past they wouldn't have paid. They would have only paid 20% on all of their income. So that also applies at that level as well. So that's just to explain what fiscal drag is that you're talking about. And it's quite right. I mean, it's called a stealth tax, and it is because there's no announcement made. It's just there's no increase. And frankly, it's wrong. I mean, because it is affecting the poorest people the most. So the government are very wrong not to increase tax thresholds and not to announce it. And I believe that will be an issue in the next general election, because it's something which is, I think, the man in the streets thinks this is very snide and a secret way of raising taxes, and it's dishonest.
Yeah, a lot of people think that, and a lot of people have had their eyes opened. Let's carry on our world visit and go to the Ukraine, which has been muted because of what's happening in Gaza for several months. Some peculiar things are coming out, even to the extent that Russia is not the wicked nation that it's allegedly is on the world scene. I've got mixed thoughts about that one, but some people are actually saying, well, what do you expect Russia to do when Clinton and later Obama allowed NATO to ingress to the border of Russia and put weapons there? You should expect a reaction, almost excusing Russia. I don't hold to that theory personally, but it's there and it's coming out. Now, who is winning the war? We don't know. We get conflicting views, but we get some facts escaping that are fascinating. We reckoned in the West that if we supplied the best tanks in the world, that would open the gates for the fight back by the Ukrainians. So eventually the Abrams tank from the US, weighing in at 64 tons, was deployed. And you know, a drone weighing ounces and costing not £6 million, which one of these tanks costs, but costing £200, is destroying the tanks. And they're getting bogged down, of course, especially in springtime, on the soft ground. It's fascinating that a little tiny handheld drone, you can put in a very clever weapon, drop it on a tank, and it destroys it. Ukraine have always been very good at technology, usually hacking. It's paid off now, and they're fighting back big time. They're using British missiles to shoot at ships in the Black Sea. Will there ever be an end to this war? Will we ever get the truth out of this war? Are Russian armed men too many against the Ukrainians? They're gonna lose in the end, is the consensus.
Okay, well, the first thing we need to say is that the principle is the right to self-determination, which, interesting enough, is the principle that Germany very much applied after the war, because obviously they've been run by a horrible Nazi government that had done absolutely appalling things. And when they were defeated in the Second World War, then Germany was divided up and occupied by different parts of the Allied forces. And Germany basically said, look, hold on a minute. Yeah, we've done terrible things during the war, but every part of the world should have a right to self-determination and to decide for themselves how they want to be governed. And Ukraine was under Russian influence in the same way, incidentally, as Belarus is today. But they had what was called the Orange Revolution, and they voted overwhelmingly for a president in Zelensky who was pro-NATO and pro-EU. I mean, he was elected on a platform of taking Ukraine into the EU and taking Ukraine into NATO. That was the platform he was elected. Now, obviously, that's totally contrary to what Russia wanted. I mean, they were furious that their puppet was overthrown and and no longer in place, like their puppet is in Belarus, for instance, just manipulating elections. So, as far as Russia is concerned, the Ukrainian people have got no right to make their choices that they want as to how they wish to live their lives. The Ukrainian people have got to be under the influence of Russia. That's Putin's position. That is wrong. That is completely and utterly wrong. It is not NATO that has wanted to take over Ukraine or the EU that's wanted to take over Ukraine. In fact, NATO have actually said no to Ukraine. And the EU thus far have also said no to Ukraine. It's Ukraine that is asking to join NATO and asking to join the EU. That's the reality of it. Now, Putin decided that the only thing to do was to invade Ukraine. That was evil, evil. He has got absolutely no right whatsoever to invade a country that does not wish to be under their influence. And then, of course, he has all of these ridiculous elections, I mean, which some people can be fooled by. I mean, to be quite honest with you, when they first announced it in 2014 that Crimea had voted over 90% that they wanted to be part of Russia, I was fooled by that because I thought that was genuinely an expression of the wishes of the people of Crimea, that they wanted to be part of Russia. And I was thinking, well, if they want to be part of Russia, then why should anyone stop them? But then you realize that they have these ridiculous votes in other parts of Ukraine, in Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia, etc. And Putin announces that all these areas want to be over 90% want to be part of Russia, and you think, well, it's just obviously complete and utter nonsense. I mean, because the people, for instance, in Kherson were voting with their feet after Russia occupied them, and having all these massive demonstrations in the street. And you're not going to tell me that 90% of them want to be part of Russia. I mean, it's just complete and obviously complete and utter nonsense. And they're just manipulated elections, just the same that Putin has just announced that he's just been re-elected for another 6-year term, having arrested and imprisoned and even killed all his political opposition. And then, of course, fraudulently manipulated the ballots. I mean, Navalny actually called for people to vote en masse at 12 o'clock as a symbol of their protest, because that's the only way to do it. And it happened. I mean, there were masses of people voting at 12 o'clock as a symbol of protest. But I mean, this idea that 90% of people in these occupied territories want to be part of Russia, it's just a lie. It's just utterly, utterly dishonest. But I'm afraid there's been enormous amounts of disinformation coming out of Russia during this whole war. So, like you say, a lot of the time we really don't know what the truth is. And Zelensky is also painting a picture that things are worse than they really are in order to get people to supply him with weapons. So he's saying things like, we're outnumbered 6-1 and, I desperately need help. We're going to be overrun, just to try and get countries in the West to say, oh, we can't allow Ukraine to be overrun, we've got to help them. I think the reality on the ground is that they're almost completely at a stalemate. Ukraine have fought very, very well and done very well generally in this war. I mean, Russia's intention at the beginning was that they were going to take Kiev in 3 days, and they just poured in masses of forces with that intention. What actually happened, by the way, is that they were going to take the airport outside Kiev, and that was going to be their base. They flew in masses of airborne troops to take the airport, but Ukraine managed to defend it successfully. And because they managed to defend it successfully, you then had this massive queue of trucks and etc. on the road that were all intended to go into the airport and be a base from which they were going to basically take Kiev. But and they were also going to, of course, fly in planes as well. To that base. That was Russia's plan, but it failed. It completely failed. And some people will say that was the hand of God. And there was a lot of prayer going on to stop Russia taking Kiev. And I believe the fact that they've been successful and they've been held back has been divine providence. There has been a lot. God has been helping people a lot. I'm not saying that Ukraine are 100% godly. They're not. But God hates what Putin has done, no question.
Interesting. Back over to the States. It's over in Europe as well, but particularly in the States. Driver sharing information. Now, everything's very technical in the modern car. You've got the big screens there. You've got driver information, which apparently is escaping to people like insurance companies. Now, in UK, of course, as a young driver, you can elect by one particular insurance company to have a magic box, a black box, if you wish, in the car, which records your driving capabilities and modus operandi, what speeds you're doing in what areas. And they can offer you lower insurance, or they can offer you insurance as a young person, which is difficult to get. It's gone one stage further in America because they're getting all sorts of information, especially from Cadillac and General Motors, who perhaps don't get people to read the small print, because they should give people a choice before signing up for all their driving information to go out. But of course, they get paid money for data. Data is a very precious commodity in all its forms these days. And people are being stopped getting insurance. Hey, look how you drove that car in the last 12 months. This is sneaky stuff, Sid. It's, well, there you go. Big brother at large, isn't it?
Yeah, we're moving into a whole sphere where the authorities have got a lot more information on us, and they share that information. And although on a personal basis, for instance, in the Christian People's Alliance, we've got a lot of data on our 4,000 supporters, but we are strictly not allowed to share that data with anyone. It's strictly forbidden. And that will be the same for companies, but it doesn't seem to apply to the state. When it comes to the state, they can share information as much as they like, and especially organisations like the police. And I'm quite sure they've got a file on me. They've probably got a file on you, because I did a demonstration, for instance, in Canterbury Cathedral against the Archbishop of Canterbury at that time, who said that he thought in having Sharia law in the country was a good thing, and it was working perfectly well in northern Nigeria. We did a demonstration saying no to Sharia law and support persecuted Christians, which gave me effectively a police file, because I was doing another demonstration later on in London, and the police actually said to the organisation of the demonstrations, pointed to me and said they were concerned about me being present at this demonstration, which was quite interesting. But it just shows they've got a file on me. And this is what happens these days, and it's going to happen more and more as it's much easier to have data. And undoubtedly, insurance companies are going to be probably paying to tap into police data so that they can actually get the information that they need from the police on anybody that's got a police record. It's going to happen, and I'm afraid there's nothing we can do to stop it.
Well, dystopian times. Let's talk a bit about dystopian times and something, and I can't understand why, or perhaps I can, that's not been picked up. This weekend, something happened with the Labour Party, and I was just waiting for a massive bomb to explode from the Tories. Not a whisper. Now, not only not a whisper, the story was revealed in the Guardian newspaper, of all papers. So it's come from the Guardian. It must be true, because it really dumps Labour. It's massive, Sid. And there was a cursory mention in passing on GB News, but they didn't have a go. But I tell you what, if I was a Tory, this would be the main thing to destroy, once and for all, the challenge of Labour. Why has nobody picked up? And what am I talking about? Well, Labour has produced leaflets for the local elections, and it's plastered the leaflets with the Union Jack because Keir Starmer wants to be called a faithful British subject that waves the Union Jack. That's what it's all about, to legitimise him after the Corbyn affair. He voted for Corbyn. He loved Corbyn at one stage, but now he's seen the light and out come the flags. But the activists in the Labour Party have taken big objection. Not that you know it, because there's no news about it. Well, this programme will reveal all. Let me tell you what the activists are saying. First of all, they want to target areas. Now, presumably with flags. Now, can you see going up to some of the northern towns and cities? Let's get the green Pakistani flag out here. That's going to raise the votes. Interesting thought. Oh, that's far-fetched. Is it? Let me give you some concrete evidence of a lot of the Labour Party. They don't want the Union Jack flag, but they do want colour-coordinated leaflets. Now, they're going to appeal to the LGBT community. It's called Growth Pink. That's one leaflet. The next is Energy Green. The next is NHS Blue. The next is Policing Yellow. And I've not worked this one out. There's an Opportunity Purple. So they're going to target this instead of the Union flag. And especially, you'll like this one, Sid, don't waste your time putting these Union flags out in any university town. We're going to target them. Now, think about that. That is dreadful. That is your next government.
Yes, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, I know full well that the Union Jack, I'm afraid, is associated with the far right, the British National Party, Britain First, and so on and so forth. And I would never allow a Christian People's Alliance leaflet to go out with the Union Jack on it. It's just, or at least if one was printed on that basis, I'd immediately stop it, because I know full well that what it's associated with. Now, obviously, the fact that it's associated with the far right is bad news. It's wrong. I mean, there's no reason why it should be associated with the far right, but it is. And if the Reform parties started putting out leaflets with the Union Jack on, you'd say, what are they playing at? You know, because the media want to call them far right, or in some situations have called them far right. And if you start putting leaflets out with Union Jacks on them, you're only just playing into that narrative. So the fact that the Labour Party are putting leaflets out with Union Jacks on them, frankly, is, I totally understand why some Labour councillors and Labour activists are saying, what do you think you're playing at? Trying to associate the Labour Party with the far right. And, you know, and it's, I totally understand their protest. Now, of course, you can then go and say, well, why should it be associated with the far right? Which is a perfectly fair point. But equally, you could say, why should green leaflets be associated with environmental campaigners? I mean, there's no reason. I mean, green is a wonderful colour. I mean, why should it be associated with environmental campaigners? Well, the fact is, it is, whether we like it or not. I mean, why should blue be associated with business? I mean, well, it is, because the Conservative Party is a business-friendly party. Why is red associated with Marxism and socialism? Well, you know, it is. I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, red is normally, I mean, it is, by the way, it is the opposite in America, of course, because red is the Republican Party and blue is the Democrat Party. But in this country and in most of the world, red is associated with socialism and with the Labour Party. I mean, that's the reality of it. And, you know, if we put out a leaflet that was all red, you'd say it's the Christian People's Alliance gone socialist. I mean, people would, oh, if we put a leaflet out that was all green, people would say it's the Christian People's Alliance now associated with the Green Party. I mean, you know, that's the reality. And I'm afraid you've got to accept what these symbols represent, whether you like it or not. and it's very foolish to do that. By the way, as a rider to that, what I'm saying, it was quite interesting, of course, when the Labour Party decided to change their symbol and introduce the red rose as their symbol. Margaret Thatcher started turning up in Prime Minister's Question Time with red roses and basically saying, oh, I'm not allowing the Labour Party to claim the red rose. It does not represent the Labour Party to me and should not represent the Labour Party in the country. And she's basically saying, I'm not allowing them to have this symbol. Well, good luck to her. I mean, you can protest, but you see, is Keir Starmer trying to say the Union Jack should not be a symbol of the far right, and I'm reclaiming it? If that's the statement he was making, then perhaps fair enough. But if he's actually just putting it out saying, oh, I had no idea it was associated with the far right, then that's just ridiculous. It's just stupid.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree, Sid. I'm Thatcherite, perhaps. I think Margaret was absolutely right, 100% right. I'm not having my Union Jack taken over by the far right. They'll have to fight me for that. And Margaret...
Yeah, but there is a difference, you see, because Margaret Thatcher did that as soon as the Labour Party introduced the rose as their symbol. She basically said, no, I'm not letting you have it as your symbol. But you see, as far as the Union Jack is concerned, that's been associated with the far right for 20 or 30 years. It's not just been introduced recently as a symbol of the far right. So that's why you're really fighting against the whole way people perceive the far right. If you're then going to say, well, we're going to take on board the Union Jack, but for us, it doesn't represent the far right. I mean, that's the problem.
Perhaps it's my PR background. I can't think of anything better than saying, we are going to reclaim the flag. Let me give you another example. If the church had been bold enough 20 years ago to get hold of the wretched rainbow and say, this is a Christian symbol, then we wouldn't have half the problems possibly that we have now. It's about time the Christians woke up and the country woke up to what is happening and fight back.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, during COVID, the NHS was using the rainbow symbol, and homosexuals were saying, it's not fair, you've stolen our symbol. You know, why is it now being associated with the NHS when it's supposed to be associated with homosexuality? So which is quite funny, really. But at the end of the day, people can use whatever symbol they want. And as certainly as I, as a Christian, am concerned, what I say is that the LGBT rainbow is 6 colours, which it is if you count them. And sometimes they even add black and brown, which is like make it 8 colours. Whereas God's rainbow is 7 colours. So I said they're not actually using God's rainbow.
They're not indeed in any sense. Sticking with the NHS, this is today's news. They're apparently killing 250 patients a week because they're leaving them on trolleys in corridors. Well, we all know about that. It's been going on for months and years, and it's true. The Mirror picked this up and got that headline out. Interesting to know another stat has surfaced in February this year. 44,000 patients have been kept waiting longer than 12 hours on said trolleys in A&E in 1 month. That is awful. Please, dear Brit, stop waving the NHS flag. The NHS is unique in the world. It may have started off all right for the best possible reasons, but now it's completely outdated. Do you remember the time when you were banging your pots during the pandemic on a Thursday evening? Do you remember the time of the Olympics when people were jumping up and down on trampolines saying NHS, NHS, best in the world? It's now become a killing machine for various reasons. One reason is the young doctors who've got a new Hippocratic oath, and I pronounce that the right way, and who also are killing people. It wants completely disbanded, but you've not got one major party that is willing to tackle it, because the public have been utterly and completely brainwashed. It does not work. It wants disbanding. It wants to go to the model of every other country in the world, practically, except the communist countries, whereby it's a partnership between the private and the state. That works.
Okay, yeah, well, I don't totally agree with that. One of the reasons I don't agree with that is because actually the cost per person of the National Health Service is about 2/3 of the cost per person of the health system in America. And the health system in America, they're constantly complaining about, everyone's constantly complaining about it, and it's ridiculously expensive and certainly doesn't work. So just getting rid of the NHS, in my mind, is by no means the answer. Our position of going back to GP fund holding, I think, is the right approach, because the biggest problem we've got at the moment is that the GP system isn't working. And if we can go back to a situation where the GP system works and people can get GP appointments and GPs will go out and see people that are sick, then that will take enormous amount of pressure off hospitals, and it should be possible to go to hospital and get an operation done, and they should work efficiently again. But you see, we know GP fund holding works because it worked in the 1990s, and Tony Blair only got rid of it in 1998, not because it wasn't working, but because it was for political reasons, because the Conservatives had introduced it, and he claimed it would reduce paperwork, which there is paperwork involved with GP fund holding, but you know, in the new age of computers and so on and so forth, then that can, I believe, be minimized, and those problems can easily be overcome. But the advantage of knowing how much each operation costs, the advantage of having an internal market where a GP can decide which hospital he sends patients to and so on and so forth, and can retain any savings he makes by reducing the cost of operations of his or her patients, you know, is of overwhelming value and overwhelming importance, and it's been proven so. So we need to go back to that. We need to go back to GP fund holding, and to me, that was what will solve the problems of the NHS. And by the way, well, I should also say that one of the problems of health in general in society is the breakdown of the marriage and family. Where the marriage and the family is working effectively and efficiently, then that is being proven statistically to mean a far more healthy society. So one of the reasons why our society is so unhealthy at the moment is because the family is broken down. And when you think that the National Health Service has also been spending enormous amount of money on things like transgender surgeries, you think, you know, what really is the NHS about? I mean, that's something which also needs to be completely got rid of for children. And as far as adults are concerned, if they want to change, and you know, a man wants to become a woman become a man, then they shouldn't be prevented from doing so. But there's no way that the NHS should pay for it. No way.
Well, I agree with what you said, Sid, but can I put an amendment in there and saying sticking plaster? And we've tried sticking plasters with the NHS and it's not worked. And I'm sure you're right, GP fund holding, etc., etc. But fundamentally, NHS does not work because it's bloated, stuffed with the wrong people. The reason for people on trolleys is there's not enough nurses, there's not enough beds. How are you going to get them? Well, you're not going to get them with middle management and everybody else upholding the virtues of the HR department of diversity, equality, etc. It's got to be reformed top to bottom, and it's got to be a partnership, and messing around with it will only make it worse. Sid, we've run out of time. But we've got to squeeze in this last item. And I thought Nicola was bad, not just for Scotland, but for the rest of the Union in many, many ways. But can I say, I now repent. Bring Nicola back. because what we've got is Humza's law that came out today on April the 1st. What an appropriate day. And it's going to gag you from saying anything. And it's reached worldwide. J.K. Rowling standing up, and even Elon Musk saying thin end of the wedge. And it is, because sure as eggs are eggs, Ireland will follow, and many other countries, because it's the hate speech thing. Oh, well, the judges have got common sense. The law is wide enough, and they can interpret it. No, it's going to stop you, Mr. Comedian, cracking any more jokes. How the Edinburgh Fringe is going to turn out after all this, goodness only knows. And it's Humza and all he's into. He's in Bute House, of course. That's the number 10 Downing Street of Scotland. And there we are. When you break your fast, he invites all his mates from whatever religion to come and break fast with him. And there is a call to prayer. Now, things are going on here that are not British, not fundamental to our Christian establishment. And it's going to finish with a train wreck. Who makes these laws and all the other stupid laws that we don't need that are being enacted? Well, it comes from professors, legal professors in universities. And so it's happened again in Scotland. It's meat and drink to lawyers, but it's a death wish for the rest of the population. You're not going to be allowed to say, as an example, Rowling, if this is a transgender woman, it's a man. Well, of course it is. That's fact. That's science. But you get put in prison for up to 7 years for that when the new laws are enacted. What a mess, I repeat myself, we are in.
Yes. Now, and the first thing people need to understand is that Humza Yousaf is a radical Muslim. I mean, there's no question about that. To argue that Nicola Sturgeon was better, of course, is in some ways perverse, because Nicola Sturgeon has proved to be corrupt. And, you know, she's still got a lot of questions to answer about the way she was spending SNP money for her own purposes. So, I mean, there's no way that Nicola Sturgeon can come back. She may have had a better image, but she was certainly a corrupt politician by the sounds of things. So that, I'm afraid, is not an alternative. The alternative actually was Kate Forbes, which was quite amazing, because when they had the election for SNP leader, Kate Forbes got about 45% of the vote, and she was a committed Christian. So in some ways, it was a battle between Islam and Christianity as to who was going to be running Scotland. And Islam won. Now, whether they actually won the vote, of course, is another matter, because Muslims have got no problem with ballot rigging and so on and so forth. You know, they do it all the time. And because, as I said earlier, they've got no commitment to the truth, they've got no commitment to democracy, so they've got no problem with rigging ballots. But it's interesting to reflect that a committed Christian has got a very large number of votes from the Scottish National Party. But if it's going to continue to be run by Humza Yousaf, the Scottish National Party has got to be wiped out in Scotland, frankly. And if they can continue to behave like this, they've got to be stopped. They have absolutely got to be stopped. And in the next election, you know, they've got to be removed from power. And the Labour Party, sadly, are probably not going to be much better. But nevertheless, whatever happens, the SNP have got to lose. They really have got to lose power in Scotland.
Interesting time, Sid. And as usual, times have run out on us. Thank you for your dissertation. I've got to say, these programs are recorded on a Monday morning, so we're both suffering from weekenditis. But you'll forgive us looking mainly at the Sunday papers quite often, because they tend to put the week in focus, which is the title of this program, of course. It's good to discuss the truth in all these subjects. We, from the Christian point of view, have a different truth, as you said, from the Muslim truth. Maybe from most of the truth that's conveyed in many nations at the moment. It's important that we seek the truth before politics. Do we finally, you've got the last word, agree on that last statement?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately there is the truth. I mean, it is the fashion to say, oh, this is my truth. I mean, and sometimes when I'm talking to Muslims, they say, oh, well, that's your truth. It's not our truth. But you see, the truth is the fact that, well, I don't want to go into great details with Islam, but, the truth is that Islam is a false religion, which I've explained on other occasions. And I can go into great detail to explain it. But that is the truth. It's not the truth that there are lots of different ways to God, and that the Muslim way is one way and the Christian way is another way, but we all end up at the same destination. That is a lie. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. That is the truth. And it may be convenient and nice and sound nice to say, oh, well, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, they've all just got different paths to the same end. It may sound nice, but it's not the truth. And what we stand for is the truth, and we will always stand for the truth.
Sid, thank you so much. We will see you next week.